got another writing lesson today. Now, I've been so impressed so far. The story ideas are fantastic, and the sizzling starts and the backfill that you've written, they were also very creative. So today we come to the pebble, the first event in your story. Now remember, it's a pebble because from here the events will escalate, they will build. This is the first event in your story, and then from here the story will build and get more and more exciting. Just reminding you that on our story map, this is the gradual build of tension. So it's the first problem, the small problem. And when you were looking at Granddad's teeth just before in the other writing lesson on sizzling starts, it was when Granddad's false teeth are missing and he can't speak without them properly. The first small problem, and it grows from there. Now, as we come to write our event one, our pebble today, I want to remind you about a technique that writers use to help create a really clear picture in the reader's mind. It's called show, don't tell. So it makes the story much more interesting and allows the reader to really understand what the character feels. It helps us to add more detail and more length to our events. And rather than just telling the audience exactly what's happening, like we were looking at last term, it uses words to paint the picture in the reader's mind. So today I'm going to show you lots of different examples of show, don't tell. And then you're going to write your first event, the pebble, using the show, don't tell technique. So it's going to be a very descriptive first event. So here's an example of telling and showing. So over here, Connor was scared. That's someone just telling the reader exactly how Connor was. Connor was scared. You're just telling them. Over here, this is an example of showing them, of using words to paint a picture. You don't actually say Connor was scared. The words that you paint and the picture that the person reading it creates lets them know how Connor was feeling, and it's a lot more interesting to read. Connor's tummy started to churn, and he was beginning to break out into a cold sweat. Now, we know all those things point towards him being scared, so you're showing rather than telling. Here's another one. You could just tell them Sadia felt happy, or you could show with your words using words to paint a picture. Sadia's eyes lit up as a huge smile appeared on her face. It's showing the character's emotions using words. A lot more interesting to read and paints that vivid picture in the mind. Another example, telling would just be saying, Alex was shy. You're telling them he was shy. But rather than doing that, you can show them. Alex blushed and looked up at the sky. You're showing them how the character's feeling with words. And the last example, Sophie was angry. That's telling the reader exactly what Sophie was, just telling them. The better way is to show them using words. Sophie's face turned bright red and she started to clench her fists. You're showing them that Sophie is angry rather than just telling. Now, I've got another example here of how you can think about the character's face or body or voice when you're showing. So here's an example. So if you're going to tell the audience, he was petrified. You've just told them he was scared, he was petrified. Or you could show using the different parts of the body. So his eyes were wide with fright, and his mouth was opened in horror. His knees were shaking, and he covered his face with his hands. He spoke slowly, and his voice quivered. He could barely get out a few words. And can you see how it adds a lot more detail when you show what's happening? Look how many sentences we got here just from describing the different things the body was doing and the different things the voice was doing. You have a lot more detail. If you just wrote, he was petrified, that's one short sentence. Then you have to think of many more. So showing helps us to extend our story into more detail. This is going to help you today, and you can use these as you're writing. So because you're writing your first event, your pebble, on paper, I would suggest having this page open, because have a look for each of the different feelings on here. it gives you ways that you could show it using words. And you're very welcome to use some of these today in your writing. So instead of saying your character was sad, you could say his eyes were full of tears, his lips were trembling, he was hanging his head, his shoulders were drooping, his face was frowning. There are ways to show that they're sad rather than just saying he felt sad. So even hot and cold temperatures, you can show that using your words. If someone's cold, you could say her teeth was chattering and her body was shivering. It's a great time to use a lot of similes as well, because that really helps to paint a picture. So draw on what we did last term to really write a great description for your first event, your Pebble. You can also show and not tell with the setting. So lots of adjectives, lots of description of what can be seen helps the audience to paint that picture in their mind as they're reading. You will put a picture of your first event, your Pebble, here. Remember, it needs to be on paper because when it comes to typing up later in the term, it's going to be way too hard if you have your story across different seesaw activities. So under your sizzling start and backfill, leave a line. This is a new paragraph. It's event number 1. You're going to write it out today. All right. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you show the action and the feelings of your story rather than just tell what's happening. Good luck, everyone.